to this meeting of the Isle of Wight Council's. Oh, there's a bit of feedback there. I'll try to lower my voice maybe. Right. Right. How's that sound? That is actually working. Okay. So anyway, I'll start that again. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting on Monday, the 18th of March, 2024 of the Isle of Wight Council's Audit and Governance Committee. I will just start by alerting you to the fire procedure. The test alarm has already taken place this morning, so if there is a sounding of the alarm, please note that it will be a real one. Treat it as a real emergency. Evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route, which of course is across from me, down the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or the public gallery, although there is no member of the public present at the moment. Exit via the door at the back of the building and walk across the inner car park to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency, and please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. Okay, members, officers, and others attending, do remember this is a recorded meeting, so I'm sure you all want to keep your remarks temperate, even on a Monday morning. And so we'll kick off on the agenda. Are there any apologies or changes in membership? There are none, but Councillor Jarman is indicating.
Sorry, Chair. I understand Councillor Crook might have been delayed. There's a road closure on his route, so it may be slightly late.
Thank you, Councillor Jarman. It's useful to know. And in which case we can move to second item of the agenda, which is the minutes, which when I mostly refer to page numbers, it will be pages within your pack as opposed to page numbers on the report. And so if you are referring to any pages and you want to avoid any confusion, then just highlight whether it's the report pack or on a report, otherwise that number exists. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2023, are those a correct record or are they in need of any correction? I see no one indicating so. Otherwise, I'll move from the chair that we confirm that they are a true record. Are those in favour of that? We show. Thank you. I'll take that as your assent. I should have welcomed also. I know she has been a member of this committee for a little while, but other reasons have meant Councillor Critchison has not been able to attend a meeting. But welcome, Councillor Critchison. I hope you will find it interesting, informative, and enjoyable. But 2 out of 3 may not be bad. So I'll just initial and sign the minutes. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Colleagues, have you any interests to declare? Councillor Jarman.
Yes, there's some matters here which pertain to the pension committee and fund, and as chair of the pension fund, I'll have to sit outside. I don't think I need to leave the room, but I will sit aside for those items. Not participate in that discussion. Okay,
if you wish. I don't think they're precluded from it, but Councillor Churchman, I presume.
Same applies to me, right. Member of the pension committee, and I attend the access meetings. Right.
Councillor Luceni.
As everybody knows, I'm a cabinet member, so if there's anything to do with my portfolio or anything like that, I won't be taking part.
Thank you for that. No other declarations of interest at the moment, but if you do think of anything at any time, just indicate, and I'll, as a matter of urgency, take that so that's on the record. Item 4 is public question time. I've been advised there are no public questions and there is no one present in the public gallery to ask questions. So we shall move to item 5, which are the 3 reports from our external auditor. We have joining us virtually Kevin Suter and Jason Jones from Ernst & Young. I'll invite them to briefly introduce those reports, highlight to us anything in particular that they want us to be aware of, and any situations. Oh, and indeed we have Rumana Rafiqullah as well. Welcome to this meeting. And also highlight to us anything in which you need a specific resolution. I know, note in one place the report does say that you request that the committee acknowledges that it's considered something. So I'll hand over to you for a brief introduction. Who wishes to take that?
So I'll start there, Chair. Good morning, members. So we've got 3 reports in front of you today. I was going to let my colleagues just briefly introduce them one by one. And if we can then take questions on it. So if we do the first report, break, pause, take questions, would that be okay, Chairman, to do it in that style?
Yes, indeed, yes.
Okay. So if I could ask Jason to just take us briefly through the first report on the agenda, please, which is of the pension fund audit for 22-23.
Yep, thank you, Kevin, and good morning all. Chair, if I can ask members to turn to page 25 of the pack. That's our executive summary, and I will take members through the executive summary in detail as it contains all the key points and reflections. And then I'll just touch on some of the other areas, but happy to take questions as I go along, Chair. So page 25 is the status of the audit. Some of these have been resolved by now, but there are items which we can only do at the end of the audit, but all the detailed work has been completed. And just to let members know, because of the delay on the council audit side, which we also explain on page 25, we're not able to fully conclude and give our opinion on the pension fund accounts, as these are consolidated within the council statement of accounts, Chair. And we did touch on that at the last meeting as well. We also refer on page 25 to an uncorrected misstatement at the bottom of the page, but I'll touch on that in the next section. So if we can move to the next page, where we present our risks and areas of audit focus. We presented our audit plan at the last meeting, and that contained our assessment of the significant risk and the areas of focus for the pension fund. So this section of our report provides the details of the work performed and the conclusion reached in relation to those risks. There were no new risks identified during the course of our work, and we performed our procedures in line with our audit plan. So if I can take members through the risks that we identified. So the first one is the risk of misstatement due to fraud or error. So the auditing standards require us to consider this risk on every audit. It's not specific to the pension fund, and it links to the risk of what we call management override of controls, where we recognize that management is in a position to override controls and make it appear as if those controls are operating effectively, since they're the one that set those controls. To address this risk, we reviewed a number of journal entries which we deem unusual. We looked at post-year-end journal entries which improve the financial position, and also we review accounting estimates for any management bias. We've not identified any matters to bring to your attention in this regard. The next one down is the valuation of level 3 investments. So these are deemed to be a significant risk due to the complex nature of these investments, the valuation thereof. We did identify one judgmental difference of 1.5 million. That's within infrastructure asset investments. In our testing of the valuation of these investments, we created a range using a number of indices, and the council's valuation was about 1.5 million lower than our range. But because the amount was immaterial, the pension fund opted not to make any changes. And yeah, the fund uses the information provided by the fund managers. Then the last risk on page 26 is the IAS 26 disclosures. So these disclosures in the pension fund accounts contain a number of assumptions and estimation uncertainty. And these are assumptions around salary increases, mortality, discount rates, those type of disclosures. And we reviewed the work of the pension fund's actuary, and we also made use of our internal pensions team. And we were comfortable that the assumptions applied and the disclosures were reasonable. So again, no matters to report there. I'll just pause there, Chair, because if there's any questions, because that's the main bits that I wanted to cover.
Colleagues, do you have any questions on that risk elements? Councillor Redrow.
In regarding to the receiving response from the management for our assurance letter request, did I hear you say you still not received that?
Through you, Chair, that has been received now. Yeah, so we did get that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any other questions at the moment, Mr. Jones, so if you wish to continue.
Yeah, it just quickly to highlight a duplicate page on between page 54 and 55 of the pack, Chair. So we'll fix that in the final version of the report. And then just in terms of section 2, that contains our detailed procedures and conclusions in relation to the risks and areas of audit focus. Not proposing to go through those in detail, but again, happy to take any questions. And section 4 just provides a bit more detail on the uncorrected misstatement mentioned earlier. There's no other matters to report, Chair, so happy to take any other questions on the rest of the report.
I'm not seeing anybody indicating at the moment, Mr. Jones. There is that question where the draft letter refers to, well, it has in square brackets for something to be filled out. So I wondered if any officer of the council wanted to comment upon that at this stage.
Chair, if I may, on the letter of representation, because we can't yet issue our audit opinion on the pension fund, that letter of representation will be requested once the accounts are approved, because we need it to be within a 5-day period of the accounts being approved. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Otherwise, colleagues, any questions on this? It seems pretty okay at the moment. Resolution at this stage is that we will have considered the report, and obviously noting that further reports will be coming to us. So thank you. I think we can move on to the second one of your reports.
So the second report we have today, Chair, is the Pension Fund Planning Report for the subsequent financial year 23-24. So Romana is just going to run us through the brief highlights of this one.
Thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. So
can we,
sorry.
Just a moment. Sorry, Romana. Councillor Churchman, are we on? I believe we would be.
Could I ask that it's made quite clear what page we're on, please?
Yeah. So if you can just identify at the very start what page of the pack we're on, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, of course. So the report that I'll be presenting starts from page 61. So I am the manager on the 23-24 pension fund audits. I'll be taking over from Jason from that year onwards. So I'm pleased to present this report, and the report outlines the plan for our 23-24 audit, basically. We start by summarizing the audit risks and areas of focus. Then we talk about our materiality thresholds, the scope of our audit, the audit team structure, audit timeline, independence and other matters in the appendices. I will just briefly touch over the first 5 topics that are summarized in the executive summary, and then happy to take questions at the end. In terms of audit risks, on page 66, we highlight the 3 risks that are unchanged from the prior year. So these are basically the risks that Jason touched over for the previous year's audit. The first risk, as you can see, is the generic risk of misstatements due to fraud or error through management override of controls. The second risk is around the valuation of level 3 investments. The third risk is the inherent risk around the fund actuary's valuation of promised retirement benefits. So for all these risks, we have detailed our planned responses to each of them in section 2 of our report. If you turn to page 67, we mention our materiality thresholds here. These determine the extent of our testing of amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. The basis for determining these thresholds has not changed since the prior year. So we've set our planning materiality at 6.9 million, our performance materiality at 5.2 million, and our threshold for audit differences is 0.3 million. Any uncorrected misstatements above this 0.3 million threshold will be reported to you towards the end of the audit. Page 68 highlights the scope of our audit. Our main objective is to provide you with our audit opinion on whether the financial statements of the pension fund give a true and fair view of the fund's position as at 31st of March 2024 and its performance over the year ended 31st March 2024. We are also required to provide an opinion on the consistency of the pension fund's financial statements with the Isle of Wight Council's financial statements. The next page, if we stay on the same page, 68, we mention at the end that we intend to take a substantive audit approach, which means we will not be relying on the overall, on the operating effectiveness of controls. This is the same as in previous years. If I turn your attention to page 80, that page shows our team structure. The audit will be led by Kevin as the partner in charge for 23-24. He will be supported by myself as manager and Dean Vinas as the lead senior. The next page shows that we will also be relying on the work of EY specialists to get assurance over the work of the fund's actuary in relation to the IS 26 disclosure. This relates to the third of the 3 risks that I mentioned previously. So these are all the issues I wanted to highlight from our plan, and Kevin and I are happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I note on page 75 of the pack, there is a request that the Audit and Governance Committee, so that's us, confirm their understanding of an agreement to the materiality and reporting levels. So colleagues, I hope if you've got particular questions around that request, that would be very helpful. But any questions for
Are Ernst Young aware that we, after the, I think, 15th of April, we will not have a fund manager in place? We are currently paying out fees to our actuary. In your, I'm not quite sure whether it's your opinion, etc., but how does this affect the accounts, etc., of our pension fund?
So, through you, Chairman, the impact is unlikely to significantly affect the accounts of the pension fund for the year we're looking back on. As you said, it's after the year end occurring in April. The potential risk in terms of the wider impact on the organisation is the fact that somebody leaves you and inevitably generally need to replace them. So my understanding is that officers are going through that process now, and a new officer will be appointed in due course.
in due course, well, I don't know if the rest of the councillors here, but what does that mean? In due course could be this year, next year. Do you know something that we don't? Thank you.
All I've been told, councillor, is that the process has started. I would need to refer to the officers to be able to give any more detail on that one. It's not operational decisions of that nature, and it's not something we generally tend to get involved with unless there are any problems.
Presumably that's a question that the pension committee itself is active on. Councillor Jarman, do you want to comment on what you know?
I was trying to resist very strongly, Chair. So this topic was discussed at the Pension Fund Committee. A number of very serious issues were raised there. It was then discussed at the Pension Board, where those concerns were amplified. The result of that, being somewhat judicious in my answer to do I want to say anything, is that an informal meeting has been arranged imminently jointly of the Pension Fund Committee and the Pension Board, which will be in two parts. The first will be with officers present, and the second part of that will be solely the Pension Board and the Pension Committee members attending, assisted by the Pension Fund Manager to address those issues which have been raised. There are a number of fairly serious issues to which Councillor Churchman has alluded, but also other preliminary decisions which were made. For example, that exceptional costs incurred as a result of failure to recruit should not be the burden of the pension fund itself, i.e. to the detriment of its members, but that the source of the failure being the Isle of Wight Council's failure to adequately address the resignation and departure, that those costs should be borne by the Isle of Wight Council. So it's anticipated that that informal meeting will generate a number of outturns which will then in turn need to be ratified by formal in public meetings. Hope that assists.
I hope so. Any other questions on the report just presented to us? Points? Otherwise I will bring you back to that point on page 75 to, well, we will particularly put our mind to that question, that request, that we do confirm our understanding of and agreement to those matters. Anybody dissenting from that? Do they feel that they understand what's set out there? Hope so. And do you agree? And that you agree to that? Or, so I'm seeing some nods for those who are attending virtually. So I think you have. I think we have satisfied that we do understand and agree to that. So, any other questions though on the report? Are you okay there, Councillor Richardson? I see you checking a point. Okay, thank you. Otherwise, I think we can say that we have considered that. We have acknowledged the question on page 75, that we do understand and agree to those that's been set out there in terms of that request. Councillor Redrup.
Sorry for my ignorance on this particular subject, but on page 75, you refer to audit differences of 0.345 million as an audit deficit threshold. My understanding of that is that something that we allow a difference of?
I think this is getting to the heart of that,
in the next.
That question that's requested there. So if I could invite colleagues from Ernst & Young to explain particularly that section on audit differences.
Yeah, certainly it's no problem. So the overall planning materiality is the level of which we use in planning our audit to say, do we think a possible misstatement of that magnitude would disrupt the user of the account's understanding? So would it prevent giving a true and fair view? In order that we fulfill our responsibilities, though, we do report to you issues of a much lower magnitude, and that's the audit differences threshold. We calculate that as 5% of materiality. And so that's to enable you to have the information to fulfill your responsibilities, so you can be aware of any corrected issues or uncorrected issues from the accounts, so you can get an overview of their quality.
Thank you for that. Then,
Anything else on that? I think that was going to the heart of that request on that page, so hope that was helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we can move on then. Thank you very much for that. You have a third report for us, the value for money interim report, which is page 101 onwards in the pack.
Thank you, Chair. That has saved me pointing the members towards the page number. So yes, the third report today is our value for money interim report. It's called interim solely because we come back to the issue that because we are delayed in undertaking the council's accounts for 22-23 year, we can't publish our final report on value for money. That has to come in the auditor's annual report, which comes at the end of the audit. However, we've undertaken the work, and because we are past that year that we're referring to, it is highly unlikely that any of our conclusions may change from those presented here today. So just giving that introduction, I will pass again back to Jason just to give a brief overview of the content and the main conclusions.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Chair, if I can just turn to page 107 of the pack. And again, I'll take the report as read. During our planning work, we did not identify any risks of significant weakness in the council's arrangements in relation to the 3 reporting criteria for value for money, that being financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. We've since concluded our work, and we have no significant weaknesses to report here in the council's arrangements from a value for money perspective. The NAO code does require us to provide some commentary against the 3 reporting criteria, and this is reflected on pages 110 to 112. And then I was also just going to touch, Chair, on the appendix, which is Appendix A, where we set out the council's arrangements against the same 3 criteria, but then it's also broken down further into sub-criteria. And these are also in accordance with the NAO's code of practice. So the arrangements you see on Appendix A, which is page 114 down. So these arrangements are documented based on our discussions with management, a review of the various policies and procedures of the council, and the review of committee minutes. And our review of these arrangements did not highlight any significant weakness in the council's arrangements from a value for money perspective. That was all I was going to say on that report, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Colleagues, questions on this report? Yes, is there? No? Councillor Jarman, you're smiling at me. I'm not sure if that's an indication or, or just...
No, well, we do smile a lot, hopefully. I feel it's only proper to point out, as we discuss value for money in this regard and the link between the council and the pension fund, that both at the pension board and at the pension fund committee, there have been serious reservations expressed about the cross-charging levels between Isle of Wight Council and against the pension fund, and initiated by the pension board, but also supported by the pension committee and by the pension fund manager. Further details on those have been requested, and indeed some of those fees which are considerable, for which we don't have the detail, may later be subject to challenge. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments on this report? Obviously, it does is an interim report. Does reference this committee in a number of places, so that highlights the importance of the role that this committee has. I think on reading it, it is actually something I would recognise as being what the council does do. And I think that's the key thing to test back, that when presented with something like this back to us, that we do actually recognise that this is what we do to make sure we do things right. But if there are no other questions or comments on this, which appear not, then I will thank colleagues from Ernst & Young for their presentations this morning and look forward to engaging with you later this year towards our July meeting, which is when we will be engaging again, although we as a committee may indeed be meeting sooner than that. One thing, just before you may want to leave, although of course you're welcome to watch all the way through, and I'm sure you will, is just to let my colleagues know that one of the things I discussed with Ernst & Young colleagues last week was having a meeting of this committee's membership with our external auditors. I meet with them virtually before each meeting, but it is good practice for the whole committee, I think, to meet with the external auditors at least once a year. So I've asked them to have that in mind ahead of our July meeting. Otherwise, thank you very much for your reports.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Which moves us to item 6, reports of the Chief Internal Auditor. Can I just say, I seem to be suffering from both noises off, plus also a slightly blocked right ear. So I would encourage people just to speak up a little bit, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The report that you have in front of you is our progress report. So it's giving a position on the last reporting period. We should be able to complete all planned work within our timescale to enable the annual opinion to be provided later on this year. Contained within the report, there are a couple of audits where none of which are limited assurance, but there are a couple of high risk contained within, just to bring your attention to them. Neither of them, though, should cause significant concern. The first is in relation to the disabled facilities process, and that is the element of the grant that is not used on facility adaptations, where there is a requirement for it to go through an approval regime. The oversight of that particular area moved late last year, but there are arrangements in place to make certain that any expenditure, as I said, goes through appropriate approval channels. The other element to bring to your attention is also accounts payable, where we've highlighted changes to supplier detail as being a high risk concern. I think globally, criminal gangs are exploiting organisations, and so the number of checks to which are required need to be extended. What I would say in this particular area is when we have evidence through our testing, when the council has actually been robust, some suppliers are particularly aggressive. Just wanted to flag that with you as well. There are arrangements in place, however, for both. There's nothing else within the progress report to highlight, but I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that. Colleagues, questions on the internal audit progress report? Councillor Redrup.
Once again, I apologise for my ignorance of your suppliers being aggressive. Clarify that, please.
So the authority obviously order a number of supplies.
Yeah.
We tested a number of changes that suppliers had requested, and one of the suppliers where they had requested their bank details to be changed were pretty aggressive with staff at the organisation when staff were attempting to undertake general checks and balances to make certain that what they were changing was appropriate and also. And it's a little unusual to actually experience that, but I think it is appropriate to flag to you that you may well get the flip side of the equation where perhaps portrayed to you that council officers are dragging their heels trying to implement something, but actually what we've evidenced is there are occasions where suppliers are not playing ball and they're being particularly aggressive. I had highlighted with the service and with CMT when I flagged this particular prompt, but I just wanted to make you aware the other side of the equation.
And following through on that, ultimately there's some appropriate sort of a management support in terms of managing those sorts of things. There are nods to that. It is very important, and the situation is such that we are the users of public money, and it's the risk to us is not just a financial one; it's a reputational risk as well. That if things go are mishandled financially, so we do have to go through absolutely every step. Presumably, it is something though that is highlighted as early as possible in any relationship with the supplier to say, particularly if they've not had dealings with a local authority before, that you may find some of it a little different from what you're used to, kind of approach. I don't know, but it is very, very important that we know that our staff are feeling that they can be taking all the appropriate steps. Deal with that. Colleagues, questions otherwise on? Again, none, but thank you for your report. We can move on to the second of your reports, which is the internal audit plan, which is from page 151 onwards in the pack.
So again, this time of year, the report that you have in front of you is the schedule currently of activities that the internal audit section will perform over the coming year. To get to the schedule of audits, I would have had conversations with all relevant directors. I also sat down with the UU South chair. I talked to external audit, chief exec, and a number of other relevant individuals. So the schedule that you have is based on an assessment as to the risk of a number of the activities. You have to align to your risk register. We also have to align to your corporate priorities with any work that is performed to enable us to comply with public sector internal audit standards. Over the last few years, the plan has remained reasonably flexible, i.e. on a quarterly basis, if there are other risks that are emerging, that means we need to make some movement in the plan, that will occur throughout the coming months ahead. There isn't probably anything else, Chair, to say in relation to the actual plan, but I am happy to take any comments. The scopes will be agreed for the individual reviews later on. The only final thing to perhaps flag with you is where there are grants that the council receives, where there is a requirement to get them signed off by the chief exec and the chief internal auditor, they will be added to the plan and as and when we become aware of them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And indeed, as the chief internal auditor was just saying, I had the pleasure of discussing this beforehand with her and team members. So it has, I hope, had the benefit of some of my input. I certainly I recall asking questions around a number of the kind of the reasons behind things. I think that's my recollection, that I did indeed ask those questions as to why, but obviously in the end this is a professional judgment as to what needs to be looked at and on what cycle. So I'm very confident that this is a sensible plan for the year coming up. Colleagues, questions on this? Can Councillor Jarman.
I don't want to hog this too much, Chair, but sorry, Elizabeth, has internal audit identified any implications on internal audit as a proposed move to a system?
It's only been recent that I've actually looked at the finer detail. There are some risk exposures either side of the equation, whether you keep with the current arrangements that you have or whether you move to a committee system. Those are not something that we would include in our audit plan of activity to specifically review. It is a judgment for this organisation based on obviously your working party, which had councillors and officers to attend to go through those relevant pros and cons. There isn't anything significant that I would flag. As I said, there's pros and cons on both particular methods which you can have in place here. I have flagged a couple of items. So, for example, you're looking to implement possibly this year. I would flag that as a concern time-wise. Not that it is a significant risk, but to implement within that time frame is a factor that you would need to consider. Beyond that, Councillor Jarman, don't have many other queries. As I said, there's pros and cons both sides of the equation.
Thank you for that. And of course, we do have an item further down our agenda on those future governance arrangements. So explore some of that a little bit later on. Colleagues, other questions on this report? Okay. And a point to note from yes.
There are two errors I just draw your attention to. One is on page 157, where the Better Care Fund subset I've got noted as a follow-up. The previous report I've just presented actually deferred that audit, so it won't be a follow-up. It will be a full if we go ahead with that particular review. But I'll also talk to the Director of Adults because I failed to have that conversation, so apologies. The other amendment is on page 158, where halfway down the page there is disabled facilities and it's the grant review. That is in the wrong area. It should not be community services. It should actually come up and go in addition under adult services, where there is already a placeholder for a review. So there's a process review and a grant review. It's just in the wrong area, Chair.
Thank you for that clarification. I don't think there is anything else. One thing I did discuss with both our audit team here on our pre-meeting was the potential for me, particularly if I remain in the chair after the annual general meeting, of following through an audit from start to finish. Something that I think would be very useful for me to, if I remain in the chair, to have an understanding of what actually happens at the coalface, not to interfere in any way in that, but to see what goes on underneath one of these items. So certainly be something I would want to report back on, if obviously subject to whatever happens at the annual general meeting this year. But otherwise, we can go back to the recommendation to colleagues. Approve. So with the corrections that the Chief Internal Auditor outlined, do we approve? I'll move that from the chair, that we approve that plan. Show. Yep. That is agreed and approved. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. And a third report, the tax evasion policy, which is at page 169 of the pack.
Thank you, Chair. So the final report is a minor update on the tax evasion policy. I say minor update because there is nothing significant, but it is healthy to actually do a policy review. Tax evasion is reasonably new legislation. We have actually had a case, not at this authority though, but elsewhere. So it was good to actually review and dust off. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have in relation to that particular item.
Colleagues, questions on? You're tempted, Councillor Redrudd. Be tempted. Okay, but do feel tempted if you wish. Otherwise, colleagues, any questions on this? So, recommendation is to approve, I believe. Yes, so to para 3 that corporate tax evasion policy be approved. I'll move that from the chair. Is that acceptable? Yeah, that is approved. Thank you. Then item 7 is on the Treasury Management Strategy Annual Report, page 185 in the pack. I have Joe Cook here. Do you wish to introduce the item and draw our attention to anything in particular?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I'm sure you've all read it with close attention. And I know it's very good for curing insomnia. No, being serious. It's just literally, this is the Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25, and this presents the limits and the all the types of investments and borrowings that the council can undertake over the next 12 months. As per the previous years, we've used a template provided to us by Arlene Close, our Treasury Management Advisors for the council. This then is sort of edited so to make sure that the comments within it and the paragraphs are actually pertinent to the Isle of Wight Council. So just it saves us an awful lot of reinventing the wheel each time. Between 23-24 and 24-25, there are very few changes, but there is one I'd like to draw your attention to. On page 203 in the pack, or within the table thereon, there's we have reduced the maximum that can be invested in each money market fund down to 13 million from 16 million. When we derive these limits, we are looking at the amount of available reserves that we have, and we want to make sure that for each single investment, we will not no more than 10% of the reserves would be at risk, which is why we have got that down. Apart from that, there's nothing else I really wanted to add, and I'd just like the committee to adopt the policy, please.
Thank you for that, and thank you. I alerted Ms Cook to an observation I'd had around the use of a template when I did a little bit of, you know, the funny things that you do when you are reading reports like this is you sometimes it comes across your mind that you should check who else is using the template, and indeed this template is used by a very good number of local authorities. And then I found myself digging into Arlene Close's actual discussion of the templates that they produce, where they have the very firm injunction that these are templates and that it is very much on the local authority that is using them to make sure that they are fit for the purpose of that authority. So prior to this meeting, I did have a short discussion with Ms Cook about this, and I did do some comparing and contrasting amongst our templated and bespoke version of that template with other authorities, and it does seem that I can assure you that there are clear differences between those, which to me satisfies what I was told earlier, that these have been properly considered in an Isle of Wight Council context, even though you will find the same paragraphs in many other local authorities' treasury management strategies. Probably also a good thing to know that many other authorities are using similar sorts of strategies, and therefore they must be working more than just for us, but for others. But that's the sort of thing that does cross your mind. And I do read these reports, I can assure you, perhaps to too much level of detail at times. But anyway, colleagues, questions on Ms. Cook's report? I think you're going to get away with a quick one on this one. I will move then from the chair that the recommendation is that we do adopt the Treasury Management Strategy for 2024-25. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you. That is agreed, and thank you. And then item 8 is the Treasury Management Report, Cord 3, from page 215 onwards in the pack.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you announced, the second report for the quarter 3 of 23-24 performance report for the Treasury Management. Again, we have used a template provided to us by Arlene Close, which we have gone through and edited and adapted for the council. And within there, they've also included an economic conditions narrative which was produced as at the 16th of January. A little bit out of date, but it does give some sort of flavour of the background of what's going on. Throughout the third quarter of 23-24, there was a period of stability with the Bank of England interest rates, and so it stayed at 5.25%. And markets are now starting to think about a possible reduction of the rates, possibly in the summer of 24, but I'm not sure whether that's going to happen. It may be later. May even be looking at 25. At the end of December, our level of borrowing had reduced by just over 16 million from the beginning of the year. 5 million of this reduction was due to the repayment of the Lobo loan in quarter 2, and that details of that is indicated on page 228 in your pack. This is a loan that was taken out a long time ago, and it was Lobo is a lender's option, borrower's option loan, and it was one that the lender could opt to increase the interest rate, which they did, obviously, because the prevailing rate had gone over the rate of the loan. We did repay the loan, but we didn't actually have to take out any additional borrowings at that point to do so. We managed to use funds that we had. But at the end of December, investments had declined slightly on the position at the start of the year, which works if you think about we've repaid borrowing. So obviously our investments will. Despite the higher rates that the Bank of England were charging, we managed to contribute about 2.9 million at the end of December to the forecast financial position of the council. This was helped by, obviously, our investment income had increased, and although the loan interest had gone up, the vast proportion of our loans are fixed interest, and they're historic loans, so it's not many new loans that are going to be affected by it. Also part of the report is the compliance that we report on the compliance to the Treasury Management prudential limits that we set in the 23-24 strategy. They were all complied with, apart from the measure of security, which is on page 235 of the pack. This occurred because we took out a short-term deposit within a bank. It's actually within Lloyds Bank, our current banking partner, and that was classified as an investment, and it just increased the level of risk a little bit. But it was a short-term deposit. It matured within, I think we only had it for 35 days, but we got a very good interest rate for it. So we thought it was worth going for. And that's all I really have to.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions on this report? Councillor Churchman.
I'd like to raise something. At the moment, Lloyds Bank, certainly in the city, are not the top of the pops, if I could put it politely. And I just wonder, does the council ever change? Also, with Lloyds Bank, I'm a governor at a school, and when somebody left and took with them the PIN for the school accounts, Lloyds was so obstreperous, it was unbelievable. It took weeks and weeks and weeks to get an answer from them, kept getting referred. Do we, as a main council, have problems with them? Or is there an opportunity to change? Could we do better? I think is what I'm asking. Thank you.
Lloyds, we've been with Lloyds for about 6 years now, 7 years. We were with NatWest prior to that, because we went through the pain of a bank contract change. At that point in time, Lloyds came in, and they were the best value for money for us. We actually don't have any major issues with them. We have, with the changes in personnel, we have administrators that administer the authorities, the people that are able to go on and do anything online, and we've literally just changed the raft of people because we've had some things, so we've not had an issue with that. With regards to any changes in the bank contract, I'm going to defer to my colleague Barry Downer, because I understand he's in communication with the bank at the moment.
Yeah, we're not quite there. We're just in the exploratory stages at the moment, but the overarching idea is that the stability with Crown Bank is very valuable in terms of we've got a good relationship. We have a relationship manager with Lloyds who's on hand, dedicated to respond, local knowledge, very useful. So we do have to renew the contract, but we're not actively looking to go elsewhere at the moment.
Councillor Chung.
We do, of course, have the thresholds that we've agreed previously, which is, the BBB one and the A- for investments, etc. In terms of partnerships, I assume we wouldn't be looking to go outside of any of those earlier thresholds. Any future banking arrangement?
No, we don't. We're not looking to change any of the current arrangements that we've got.
So just a second question, which is probably back to Joe, actually. So looking at what our borrowing position is going to be in the document through to 27, which is outlined. So is that balance of how much we borrow, how much we invest, and what the net position is during that period. Looking at the predicted rates for Public Works Loan Board and other interest payments, what element do you think that will be able to contribute to our net financial position as a very favourable so far over the last few years?
Yes. The main issue we have is that the majority of our loans are long-term loans, so they are fixed. So the interest rates are not going to change on those. It would just be any new borrowings that we take out. The way we're trying to work the cash flows and the treasury management strategies is that we are borrowing as little as we physically can. We have to keep a minimum amount of money invested because we have a term opted up as a professional investor. So we have to have a minimum investment limit of 10 million. So that is a parameter that I work to make sure that we always have that money either invested with another person or another authority or another institution, or or in the bank, basically. As long as we've got that 10 million, we're all right. But we don't need to have that much over the 10 million as an essential. However, for operational purposes, we quite often will require more than that, because the variation in cash flows within a month can be quite extreme. So it's very high at the beginning of the month. By the end of the month, it's quite low. And certainly by the end of the financial year, because we have 2 months with low council tax income. So what I'm trying to say is, if we do take out borrowings, any PWLB borrowing would be, they would be instructed by Chris Ward, because they are more of a strategic borrowing for the council. The operational borrowings, which are normally short term, so anything up to a year, that is normally discussed between myself and Barry Down, my manager, and we will then look to get the best rate we can for the shortest period that we can get away with it, basically, so as we minimise the amounts. So to actually predict how we will be able to contribute going forward, hopefully we'll be able to still continue to contribute to the savings for council. I don't want to commit myself to the actual limit to levels, but we will do our best to produce as much as we can. Sorry, that wasn't a very specific answer, but that's about the best I can manage it.
It was the answer I was expecting.
Colleagues, any other questions on otherwise very comprehensive as always? Councillor Redrup.
The fixed term loans and fixed interest, what sort of time period are we talking? You did mention in that you're estimating Bank of England reducing the rates this summer or possibly towards the end of the year. I'm taking those fixed term loans will supersede that period of.
The loans we have currently, they run for a whole range of periods. I think the longest loan we've got is, I think we've got over 20 years left on it. Some of the others are only, we'll have several that will mature next year, and then others, they'll just keep going. So historically, they were smaller amounts, so no more than about 2, maybe 3 million at a time was taken out, but they were taken out frequently. So so now they're staggered, so as they are gradually maturing. But most of those loans we're actually managing to repay out of our cash reserves, so we're not actually having to go out and do additional borrowing at the moment. So I say it just depends on which loan we look at as to how long they're going to be there for.
So in other words, we're quite healthy, well-planned sort of strategy.
I'm doing my best.
That was a vote of confidence there, I think, from Councillor. But a very important one, obviously. One of the things that comes across in both of these reports is the fluidity of the situation that we're currently in and have been in for a number of years, and obviously domestically, it's going to be a particularly fluid year. Don't know when the general election is coming, and we don't know, unless anybody's got a crystal ball, exactly what the outcome of that election will be, and therefore the outcome on how others see us and the whole raft of things. It's an incredibly complicated ecosystem, isn't it, finance? And it becomes very meshed with the political situations in countries and supranationally. That you are able to achieve for us is great and much appreciated, of course. Colleagues, any other questions on Councillor Churchman?
Not a question, but just to say thank you, Joe, for a very comprehensive report, and I think I understood most of it.
I think I'm beginning to understand them as well, so I think we all are. But I have found these reports really, even though they are on quite a technical area, they have been very comprehensible, and I'm personally grateful for that. So, otherwise, let me just return up the page. for the recommendation. The recommendation is, somebody else beats me to it.
I think it's just to note the.
It is just to note the performance. So, colleagues, I think we're content to note that performance and to look forward to your next report. Thank you. We're on to item 9 now, which is the council's risk profile. That's from page 237 onwards in the pack. It's in the name of the chief executive, but would it be is it going to be Ms. Pereira or yourself, Ms. Downer, to take this forward? Sorry, yes, I should have said at the start the chief executive did alert me to have feeling somewhat unwell today, so is joining us online, otherwise would have been here today, but with Wendy then.
I'm happy to talk to it. Well, as you're aware, this is a regular report that you see every meeting. This is the strategic risk profile, which is reviewed at the corporate management team every month. This particular report refers to the position as at February 2024. You'll notice that the majority of text in italics is new, but I do want to just draw your attention to page 257, Strategic Risk 9, which is a new rewrite from the Adult Social Cares position, which I didn't put in italics, so apologies in case you missed that one. Also, just to draw to your attention, there is a new risk that's been included this time round, and that is in relation to the coastal erosion and the impact on the island's infrastructure, roads and utilities, and the financial implications that could bring to the authority. We have a separate coastal defence strategic risk, but this is drawing attention to that erosion and the infrastructure element of that particular risk. Don't believe there's anything other significant in there in terms of changes, but again, as my happy to take any questions or.
Thank you for that, and certainly it's no surprise to see this new strategic risk. I have half a memory of sort of discussing it with the chief executive a little while back, that there was potential for this coming onto her risk register because of the impact that we are seeing. So I guess, colleagues, you might want to focus some of your questions on that. Does it look like it is covering that issue properly, the mitigations in place? Obviously, risks like this do evolve in their narrative when they're new, and as we heard from Ms. Downer, this is reviewed monthly, isn't it? So we see it quarterly. But Councillor Jarman.
Yeah, just a question on strategic risk 11. This seems to be quite closely linked to the issue of coastal erosion and problems, but it's specifically related to the PFI contract. And I wondered if there were any implications on the PFI contract of the recent erosion issues that we've got. For example, we do have a number of roads and etc., which are currently under great threat, and I would have anticipated some reflection of that here.
I think what's occurred on this occasion, Councillor Jarman, is that those particular issues and risks that you're referring to are in the new risk. That's about the infrastructure, which would include the roads, in terms of that erosion and so if you look at the content of it, you'll see within the content of the new risk the reference to the roads and the infrastructure mitigations that are in place to try to reduce the impact of that.
That would encapsulate risks inherent in the PFI contract performance itself, would it?
I couldn't answer that one. I'd have to defer to the director on PFI contract element.
Mr. Rowland is online.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. As Debbie was saying, yes, the performance of the contract will be related to that, Councillor Jarman. It will be inherent within that new risk.
Okay.
I did. Thank you,
Yes.
Chair. Thank you, Colin. I guess it's trying to put some scale or magnitude or longitudinal component to that at the moment, which is the challenge. Is that me? Keep going. To put some scale or longitudinal issue onto that, Colin, at the moment, because it does seem to be a continuing and emerging theme, and its severity is quite high, and its impact on the island in many ways, not only residents but also businesses and transport services, seems to be increasing.
I agree entirely, Councillor Jarman, and we will be taking that into account in the way that we manage the contract going forward. But what I can't do is make a full list of all the contract requirements and obligations that Island Roads have in relation to this particular risk.
No, I appreciate that, Colin. I know it's very difficult to sort out what is their liability and what is not their liability. That's been an ongoing theme. So I appreciate you've got a very difficult job to draw that distinction. I think it's just to note the concern that that lack of clarity continues in a way, and undoubtedly it will have an impact on the PFI contract and on the council and on the island in general.
I think that's getting also into the heart of what I was saying at the start, that the risks like this, as particularly when they come on the new, the narrative around them does develop. But maybe that's at some point, if there is some sort of further updating around this as CMT continues to look at those two risks and the way they interrelate with each other, they may want to report back to this committee in between our formal meetings, just to satisfy us that this interaction is being properly understood. If I understand the point that you're making to some extent, Councillor Jarman.
Yes, I think it's just to accept that it is one of the very significant risks on our island at the moment. It's affecting a very large number of residents and businesses, and it's got a great deal of unknown about it. So I think those three factors together would normally give it a very high risk score, simply because of the unknowns, if nothing else. And I think being kept informed of it, as you say, Chair, would be appropriate.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, the waste contract, it says here that final test certification, March 24. Will this actually happen? Because, Colin, before you came, I've looked at that waste plant for 10 years. Is it actually finally going to happen, please?
Yes, Mr. Rowland, yes.
Yeah, Councillor Churchman, there have been difficulties with the contractor getting enough waste to actually, because one of the requirements of the testing was for them to have a full bunker of waste. Now, they've not managed to be able to do that over the period of time in which we've been doing the testing. However, we have come to an agreement with them that they have sufficient waste to go through that testing regime. So we are coming to a very close on the actual final testing regime for the waste plant. The waste plant is now operating. It's operating well. It's generating electricity, etc. The issue is just putting the final dots of the I's and crossing the T's on the performance specification requirements, so that in 10 or 15 years' time, if anything goes wrong, we can actually go back and say, well, you met the requirements. This is what the requirements are, and you're not meeting it now. So basically, it's about setting that benchmark. We are the plant is operating. It's operating efficiently. It's just making sure that we've got those final assurances on the performance test.
Thank you for that. Councillor Churchman again.
Yes, I have a different question altogether. There's reports at the moment, and I'm sure most of you know the appalling service we are getting from Red Funnel and Wight. And this affects the whole island because it affects our economy, because we are based on a tourist trade. I mean, it isn't here as a risk, but to me, having on 2 or 3 occasions over the last couple of months tried to get on and back onto the island, it has been appalling. Are the council, when I say taking it seriously, I don't know where we go from here, but it is affecting, it will stop people coming. The prices are colossal, and we really need, as a council, somehow to tackle this. Thank you.
Stockwell here has just alerted me to scrutiny be looking at this in June, I believe you said. It is a particularly acute but chronic also issue. But is there an officer who wishes to comment upon the way they're looking at things? Chief Executive is, she is there, that's great.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, and my apologies if I start coughing halfway through. Obviously, you'll appreciate that this was also a matter that was raised at full council last, when the Vice Chair of the council requested that the leader write to Red Funnel in particular, to express our concerns on the performance and delivery of service provided to the island. That letter has been sent and a reply has been received. The issue of delivery of service is one that we will continue to raise with Red Funnel for the very reasons that Councillor Churchman has outlined. I'm going to stop there, sorry.
Thank you. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of assurance that Councillor Churchman, and certainly scrutiny has it on its radar as well. It may be that CMT will want to consider sort of bringing something into their narratives on various parts of the risk register around these sorts of issues. I note the ferry companies are mentioned under the strategic risk relating to pandemic, flu, and similar sorts of things. So it wouldn't be unusual for them to be mentioned in some context. But yes, Councillor Jarman.
I think I'd be interested to know, I suspect the committee would as well, and maybe the whole island, what resilience plan do we have as a council? Because at the moment we have 3 of the high-speed cats which are broken. We have operators with other routes also broken. We have a propeller which is now US in various ways, and we have a replacement service which seems to be very challenged. So we are quite close to the threshold of having a very minimal service, and one more incident and we could be thrown into that deep black hole. So what is the plan if we have one more incident that stops the remaining link? Do we have a plan even?
Do we have a plan B?
Yes. I'm happy to hear if there is no plan B, by the way. That may well be the case.
The Chief Executive, if she's going to voice, has got a hand.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, the supply of services to the island is something that we pick up through our emergency planning team, and that's in terms of both fuel and food and other supplies as well. I think given the issues that we are currently experiencing, it would be the right thing to do to ask the team to do a quick review and refresh on the emergency plan that we have to enable us to ensure that our lifeline services are maintained, bearing in mind that we have a very disrupted period of activity across the Solent at the moment, across all operators.
So a quick review like that would be very helpful, if that's what I've understood you're suggesting, Ms. Pereira, and a note round to the committee would be helpful once that's been done. That's the John.
I wonder if we could put that formally onto our future plan to review that report when it comes back, and I think it would help for not only the committee but perhaps a wider audience to know what the resilience is, because I can imagine quite a number of problems both for the island but also for the council itself. You know, we are quite reliant on staff who come from the mainland. We have responsibilities on the mainland that have to be addressed by island staff. We have services which we rely on as a council, which are imported from the North Island, etc., etc. So I can imagine there are quite a number of inherent risks in that becoming increasingly a single point of failure. Thank you, Chair.
Certainly, I think we'll take that on board for the work planning committee. Councillor Critchison.
So just clarify that. Councillor John, did you mean that if there is no ferries running whatsoever? Is that the point you were making?
Well, it's, I'm not too sure if it's no ferries, but as we are now at a very minimal service with a very large number of boats which are out of action, perhaps for quite some time, with a very limited replacement service, we get quite close to a threshold where there must be some increased risk. Clearly, if you only have one boat that's still operational that can carry freight, that's a threshold. None becomes a critical point of failure. And I think we should have a plan for if there's a limited capacity as well as no capacity to move people and services on and off the island. It isn't just a no facility at all. I think an absolute minimum facility becomes it. For example, we may well want to have a relationship with the ferry companies that says if there's only one of your boats left operational, we want to see that used for fuel and food and emergency services people and ambulances or some other critical service level rather than general tourism. I'm not putting words into people's mouths, but I can imagine there would be different levels of criticality within a plan.
Councillor Richardson
Can I
first.
Karen? Sorry, thank you. So that is just with one operator though at the moment, isn't it? It's not with all of the operators and all of their services.
So I think we have problems with both of the major operators at the moment, and obviously the third tier operator can't carry freight in the same volume by any means. So we have problems on both of the main ferry companies, which are widely reported at the moment.
Which is one question, is what the parameters are of this that we're looking at, whether it's just with one operator not performing or with every ferry that we've got or transport option that, is not available. So maybe different levels of this report. Thank you.
Councillor Luciani.
Let me just put a different hat on. Okay, so as cabinet member for the emergency services, I hope when it goes to corporate scrutiny, I will get involved more then. But this is not an Isle of Wight Council service, but what we do need to ask about at corporate scrutiny is what their business continuity plan is. Okay, so this is what they're going to do, because actually it's not our responsibility to put those on, to have those relationships, but there will be a local forum resilience plan, and I think that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, I was trying not to limit the scope in any specific way to one operator or one route. And I agree with what you say. It's their responsibility. No, it's their responsibility, of course. But at the end of the day, it is us and the island gets impacted. So we all have, I think the phrase would be skin in the game on this one, don't we?
Well, we heard what the Chief Executive said earlier in terms of a quick review on things, a note round to us that scrutiny is going to be looking at this, certainly have it on our work plan as well. And I don't think anybody within a particular ferry company, although they're not the only ones who've suffered problems in the last 2-3 years, can be aware that residents of the Isle of Wight are deeply concerned about what is happening there, and the vital importance of maintaining a fleet of vehicles that is capable of delivering a service. I believe we could then start to stray into what might be political discussion as to what we would want to see done. But I think that comes down ultimately to government deciding on whether it wishes entirely for the market to supply connection between this island and the one to the north, or wants to step in and regulate in some way. But I'll stop being tempted down that further political path. But it is very important that that it has been raised, and I think it has been taken on board, and there are processes through this council where we'll be looking at it with great seriousness. Anything else upon the risk register, colleagues? If not, go to the recommendation, which I think is to approve. It's always to approve. So I'll move from the chair that we do approve the risk register as set out. Are you colleagues in agreement with that? Yes, that's great. Thank you. Right.
I wonder if we might have a comfort
Yes, indeed. Shall we take a 5-minute comfort break then? Reconvene just about 11:32 by that clock. just about to restart. Okay, colleagues. I shall restart us in any moment. It is 11:36. I've allowed the adjournment to run on a little bit more for comfort. Are we back underway? Right. So thank you, colleagues. If we'll resume the meeting now. First of all, to welcome Councillor Quirk to the meeting and invite him to declare any interest if he has any on the business. Do you have any interests to declare at this stage, Councillor Quirk? No, you don't at the moment, but that's fine. Okay, so we had just disposed of item 9, the Council's risk profile. So that gives us plenty of time to consider the Chair's annual report, which is at page 275 onwards. You'll recall last year was a report I made based on the latest update from the SIPFA guidelines. Quite a lot of the report this year is what was in that report last year, but I hope I caught everything that had changed, things that have moved on, whatever. I think I'd highlight, obviously, there might be impacts on the way that this committee will do some of its business if there is a change in our governance arrangements. In terms of things we might have hoped to have done in the last year and not, the one thing we haven't been able to have a look at is seconding an independent person to this committee. I still think that would be a very important thing to do, but I also think it would be sensible to wait until we properly seen through the outcome of the governance review and whether or not we do change governance arrangements within the council. And I said earlier about obviously as chair I've been having quarterly meetings with our external auditors, but extending that out to at least being one annual meeting where the whole committee meets on its own with the external auditors and can benefit from those kind of candid discussions with them about how we're doing our work there and how they're doing their work. Otherwise, I think we are fulfilling our remit properly. It's always difficult to know how a committee like this is performing. If in some ways you might measure it by the number of questions we do ask, but then because we're often asking questions on reports which are very detailed, the absence of questions can be a good sign of things, that we are getting reports which are absolutely fit for purpose. But so I present my annual report to you and hope that you feel it does properly summarize the work that we've been doing in the last year. And certainly I've enjoyed chairing you all for another 12 months. Any comments on my report? Councillor Churchman.
Just to say, Chair, I do find you chair the meetings well. This is a bit of, but you know, and I do feel you're fair. We all get a fair chance to say what we like. And I always think of you as a brain box anyway. But, and I think you appreciate all the implications. So I would like to say thank you for what you have done.
That's very kind of you, Councillor Church. But I do strive to be fair. And as to whether or not I'm a brain box or just very good at bluffing things. After all, I spent 25 years in public relations, so maybe I've managed to develop an image which is not backed up by facts. But if there are no a comment from Councillor Quirk.
I'd just like to support that. I think she's been a sound chair, and the report shows a lot of what we've been doing this year. And I would just like to propose that we accept this with thanks.
I'll second.
So the recommendation has been proposed and seconded. Those of you who wish to vote on that, please show. Those in favour? Those against? For one of the few times I'm going to abstain. It being. Oh,
Come on. I almost didn't know because I hadn't read the characteristics of an audit committee member before I joined it. So now I'm reading through. Making sure I'm knowledgeable enough in it will be key. Thank you.
Councillor Quirk, can I invite you to switch your microphone off? I'm using another one which doesn't have the override facility on it. So when there are more than two on, I can't speak, which is possibly a good thing. So we have dealt with item 10. Item 11 is in three parts on future governance arrangements. We've mentioned a few times this morning about the considerations about a change in governance arrangements for this council that are underway. We've got papers from page 285 onwards. We're invited to note the progress, comment accordingly, and anything that we say we might feedback through to the future governance working group, although I think a number of us are on that as well, so we've got crossover straight away. But colleagues, any comments on this at the moment, or is there any officer who wanted to comment? Obviously, it's been very member-led up to now. So, but colleagues, Councillor Jarman?
Sure, whether we should have declared an interest if we're actually on the working group as well, should we?
I don't think it's a
I'll leave that to your
declaratory
discretion.
interest, but I think it is known. It is known, but yeah, it's Councillor Critchison.
Well, I'm not on the working group and I'm new to this, so I've been trying to catch up on a lot of these documents over the last few weeks because I wasn't aware of a lot of the inputs and detail of it. But I've just made a few notes on the extremely challenging timescales given the statutory duties, and I'm concerned with the acceptance of the operational details taking place post-May 24. It's just a few sort of red flags to me as reading through these documents, and the risk with at the working pace to deliver a non-essential change in government, and perhaps a longer timescale is recommended, would be just my first thoughts looking at a lot of the risks that were outlined in that document. Thank you.
Certainly, in the last few months, it's very much, as former Councillor Stewart would have said, the council is working at pace, quite a pace on this. Remember, of course, at full council, we do have the same report coming to us, but anything that we want to send through as messages from full council, that doesn't stop us from also having a particular view about the system. But it is noted, and indeed earlier the Chief Internal Auditor was highlighting certain aspects about that as well. Councillor Quirk.
The intention of the working group all through has been just to change those elements of the Constitution that actually are required to be changed, whereas most councils, when they undergo this sort of change, actually have a complete review of their Constitution. That's not what is happening here. We have consultants who've done this work before, and so I think some of the issues of timescale are a bit of a red herring thrown up by those who rather delay it. We've discussed it within our group, and we have sort of several concerns about the document as it currently stands. The first is that we think chairs of the committees should always be elected by full council. There's a suggestion in there that we elect them first of all and then they can sort themselves out. We think that's not correct. The second is we don't believe that the skills required for the finance element are the same as the skill sets needed for the leader, and we'd like to disconnect the automatic election of the leader as the finance lead, because that's inappropriate. The other thing is we do believe we achieved in May of this year. If we want to do it, we see it as plausible, feasible. It's supported by the consultants, by senior officers. So we think if we do it that way, get a year for it to bed in, there will be things that crop up. There will be things that you have to change. And we've got an ongoing review of the Constitution. So during the course of the year, if there are any flaws in what we got time to put it right, so that when the next incoming council is there, put it up and running properly, rather than having possibly a whole new set of councillors running something that they've had no experience of developing. I think it's important that we actually get the year in first, and then run it for the next council. And I think that's an element of this, rather than dumping it on a whole new set of councillors who will not have to put it right if there's any issues.
Councillor John, had you indicated there?
Yes, so I was prompted by Councillor Crook's remark. The Constitution is a living, breathing document. In fact, we've changed it a number of times over the last couple of years. I'm not going to say at every full council meeting, but at several of the full council meetings, there have been revisions to the Constitution. The Constitution, as it stands at the moment, is a fairly weighty document. If you remember, it was amalgamated with documents relating to protocols dealing with planning and other issues in the past. And there has been a long-standing agreement supported by the monitoring officer to separate those functions into a much more discrete and manageable document over time. So I look upon this as the first iteration of that change. And as was said, we did agree that this would be limited only to those things that need to be changed at this moment. I think we should congratulate the consultants for the work that they're doing. Obviously, their prior experience of doing this before is able to be leveraged and is of great assistance, as is, I think, the commitment that's been shown by the senior staff as well, and their input to it. So we are getting there. It has resulted, I think, since probably about October last year, of quite a lot of documentation being distributed to the groups, almost on a monthly basis. And I'd hope that as many members as possible have been able to keep up with that process, rather than leaving it to the last moment to become engaged in it.
Councillor Luciani.
Thank you, Chair. I see it slightly differently, and please don't tell me it's because I'm on the cabinet. I've got a different hat on here, okay, so some respect for that. But the people that are doing the Constitution, the 5 things, have not said that that's what they are suggesting that we do. They have been tasked with a job, and that's what they are doing. They haven't said to us, we prefer it. That's not their job to say that to us. It's our job to decide if that's what we want. Yeah. I have spoken to, again, I'm not going to give names, but some people that I deal with through my cabinet role, who are concerned that the output from the council will be less than it is now. So we definitely need to look at that decision making. I don't think this report is necessarily everything we need to look at yet. Certainly not the last report that we'll have. We've asked to see the constitutional changes at our next meeting, and we've been told they won't be done by then. So actually, this now then getting into the realms of actually we've got very little time to get the stuff, the end bit, and really make that decision. I really want people to look at it properly and not be predetermined on what they want. Look at it, what this council deserves, what other people deserves, and how we're seen from the outside.
So one thing that we hopefully brought that date being circulated in diary. So 29th of April hopefully is in your diary now as the additional meeting of this committee, where we'll be doing a final pass on things before full council might consider that. I think everything that has been said is absolutely valid in this. We should be aware of the pace at which we have tasked council officers and consultants to work at, and the pace that if it were adopted for this year, what that would mean thereafter in terms of making it work. In terms of messages through to full council, which is where I think more of this will be discussed, but it would be good to have a kind of, I think, a narrative message from this committee through to full council rather than trying to take resolutions on things that one way or another we believe one thing or another, because obviously we do have different points of view. But I think Buckwell will have taken careful notes of that and turn that into something that we transmit through to our colleagues on Wednesday. Councillor Luciani.
I just want to make the point. I really want to work across chamber. I'm not against it per se. I just want us to make the right decision, the right reasons at the right time. That's all I'm asking.
I think all of us would want to do that. And I think what we now have in place, particularly and very much so since January, is something that I think we can be assured is going through proper process in terms of the right level of expertise and resource being expended. Questions around timescale come more into the political sphere. Ultimately, the 39 of us will have to make a decision one way or another if a resolution is indeed brought forwards. It feels like we are headed in that direction. Councillor Jarman, did I see your hand again?
Yeah, I said earlier, I think it's very important that every member keeps up to date as much as they can with the documents, because there's lots of documents that have been coming out for a long time now. There's another one circulated this morning. And clearly, feedback on those is quite important. The other thing is we've got a couple of consultation and media exercises coming up, and I think members have a great opportunity to be involved in those. We've got 2 consultation days sorted out with the town, parish, community councils. There's a media plan which is in place now for communications out to the wider audience on the island. Hopefully, members will engage with those, and I just encourage them also to ask where they work with their local wards and parish and town and community councils to ask them to further circulate that information out.
On that subject as well, Councillor Jarman says keep up to date with the information. I feel that there's very, very little information in the documents that have been put forward so far to give us an actual idea of the scope of the change. So I'm hoping that some of these documents coming forward we will have information that we can relay to our residents, because at the moment I don't feel like it has enough substance to it, and I'd still say caution on pushing it forward for the reasons that Councillor Quirk said, just to get it in place in time. I would rather it was done with due diligence and best practice that I've read in some of these documents. Thank you.
And certainly on Wednesday there'll be further debate around that. Obviously, where you'll be in the chair and perhaps feel slightly more constrained, but it is very important that whatever decision is made is made properly and is seen to be made properly, and that nobody should feel that anything wasn't there for their consideration. So certainly, I'm sure Councillor Brodie, who's leading from the member side of things on that working group, if communicate through to him things that you feel working group should be ensuring is coming through to the remainder of the 39 councillors, then do say. And obviously anything you want to transmit through me as chair of this committee as well, do let me know. But any other comments on that? Councillor Churchman.
It hadn't occurred to me until Councillor Quirk mentioned that we currently more or less understand what is going on, but in a year's time, if this waits a whole year, we could have, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10, even half the council might change. And I can remember when I first became a councillor, I just could not cope with all the information that I had to take on board. And I would still say I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, because there is just so much to learn. We really need, for the future of the Isle of Wight, to take that on board and not to land it in the laps of people who really will just not understand how councils and democracy works. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Luciani.
Having been a trainer for quite a long time, if people don't know, they don't know, so it won't matter.
I think a number of these points now are straying into where we'll be on Wednesday evening when we discuss the update report. Yes, yeah, but no, I appreciate that, Councillor Jenny. Are you content that we've captured enough of the kind of concerns, and sort of the pros and cons side of things to at least send a narrative kind of report through to council on that?
Happy, Chair, to propose that we note as it suggests.
Yeah. Colleagues, are you content with that?
Yeah.
Just that we are noting, but obviously the minutes will show, and that will be going through to council members by Wednesday. Thank you. Okay. Item B is a fairly standing item now on update on the review of the Constitution, just a general one. I've not been given anything to report back myself, but I don't know if there is anything by the Deputy Monitor.
Something from him or proportionality part of the meeting.
Yeah, but that would be, yes. But I've not heard anything from the monitoring officer on specific other aspects of constitutional updates. So,
Chair, through you. You hear me?
oh, it's Francis
Yeah.
Fernandez.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, councillors. I'm covering for Justin today. So in terms of the Constitution, I'm not aware of anything that I need to report to you. And in terms of members, I mean, I hope most of the members know who I am now. I'm an experienced monitoring officer who's been brought in to support Justin in his deputy monitoring officer role. So I'm here to support the committee. So that's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think in the absence of anything specific to report through, if that's a failing on my part, I'll accept that, but I've not heard of anything. We'll move on to 11C, which, so this specifically arises from, if you refer back to the minutes, I noted at the end of members' questions that it would be helpful to bring forward an item around confidentiality, because a number of those questions had been on the matter of confidentiality. It's been very helpful that there was a report to Corporate Scrutiny Committee around that to sort of set out chapter and verse. It is a very good read, a technical read, and as you would expect, is full of citations of acts of parliament and regulations and statutory guidance and whatnot, and the clarification of differences between what is exempt and what is confidential, and all of these things that we in our perhaps day-to-day lives conflate as meaning one thing when actually they mean different things. So has anybody on that specific aspect of this item anything to raise? I think it is useful to have that on the specific aspect of this report that's come before us today. Anything else I'll deal with in a moment, but Councillor Jarman.
Yeah, I think the propositions in the detail which shows about exempt information is useful, certainly. I still have some concerns about this use of the term confidential. It is a very blurry term in many ways. We know that it is not exempt information. We know that they're different, which is good, but actually deciding what is confidential information and how we classify things as confidential is still the concern I have. It's more about the process of how do we get to that point. It may be that what we would like to see is a simple statement that everything is neither confidential nor exempt unless it's declared as such. That would be a good place to start. Sorry if I seem very logical and empirical in the way I approach these things, but to start by saying what is not basically clears the table. So everything would be subject to public disclosure, unless it was exempt or confidential in certain classes. And then the question is, what is the process of deciding what is confidential information and what is not? Because we do have a general situation that I found over the last 3 years now, where things are marked as confidential, whereas I'm not sure if they really are, or if that was the intention, or if they are confidential, to whom they are confidential. That can be equally important. So it's not that they're simply confidential, it's that they can be confidential to a group or a class who have the entitlement to access that information. So I'd like to suggest that we ask for that general statement that things are neither confidential or exempt unless they are identified as such. And I'm happy with the exempt definition because that's a statutory one. With the confidential one, I'd like to see definition of what is the process of defining how things are described as confidential and how they are assigned to some limited body or group. So it's that missing level of detail which gnaws at me a little bit.
I seem to remember, if I'm right, sorry, your microphone, Councillor. I seem to remember reading something, I think it was when Eric Pickles was still a Secretary of State. There was some guidance issued under him around, I think something not dissimilar to what you are saying, that all things are open unless they are not open, kind of thing. But I'm sure that can be provided. That sort of, it almost the past computer programmer comes in for me is like, here's the start point and here's the flow chart of the way in which things go through. I think that could be very, very helpful. Councillor Quirk.
I think it's also important to where the confidentiality is actually installed into the contracts. A lot of contracts we write, and the starting point should be that any draft contract that comes out of the council does not have a confidentiality clause in it. We don't put them there unless the client or the person we're dealing with actually wants it put there. Because I think we go to a default situation of things being confidential when they're not necessarily.
I think you make a very good point, and I think it's been discussed more widely in local government generally, that the importance of, as more and more things are passed out to contractors, that we should be very aware that of the point that you're making, that contract shouldn't just be a means of putting things into a cupboard that nobody can look at other than a very privileged few. And I found that myself in that position a few years ago when I literally had to sign a piece of paper within this council, a very unusual process, which I'm still not sure was the correct process, but I did do it in order to be able to access and be given access to a lot of information that way, which in other circumstances maybe should have been more open. But Councillor Quirk again.
I too have had to sign pieces of paper, and it seems totally unreasonable that you or I should have to sign that piece of paper, whereas the cabinet member who has access to it, who's more likely to leak it, is actually doesn't have to sign the piece of paper. There should be absolutely the same rules for everyone in terms of if you're you're taking personal liability for having access to that information. That should apply to everyone who has access to it, including members of cabinet, including officers.
I would agree with that first bit. I would say that I would not say that anybody is more likely than any other person to leak it. But I think Councillor John.
Yeah, I mean that comes back to my point of defining how do you define confidentiality, something as being confidential, and to what group do you assign that confidentiality? So if you were to say, here is the group to whom this is confidential because of these reasons, then that would be a reasonable way of doing it. And if anybody outside of that group wanted to do it, then you would have to have a secondary process for that. But I don't see any problem with starting from a proposition where everything is open. And at the end of the day, that includes fiscal elements as well, because we are all, I think, overly driven by the issue of confidentiality as relates to the use of public funds. and the key word for me there is public, that we are not dealing with my money or your money or our money, we are dealing with public money. And sometimes we lose sight of that a little bit.
Thank you. Do we feel, Councillor Churchman?
I was going to make that point. We all sit here, we are all sitting here based on money taken via taxes from everybody out there. So to me, this word confidentiality is getting totally out of hand. Businesses don't run like this. If businesses have something they want to protect, they patent it. Councils can't do that. And talking about confidentiality with other people's money, if you're talking about child protection cases, then I can understand use of the word when it comes to public safety. But otherwise, I'm sorry, it's public money all the way through.
And I think that was what Mr. Pickles was getting at. I'm not sure, though, about businesses not operating. I think that a lot of commercial inconfidence happens within business, but I've not been in business, so I would stand to be corrected on that. But do we feel we've covered this report? Now, I know there is another matter that has been brought up. So, yeah. So, yeah. I was kind of inferring that, but thank you. That's helpful, Councillor Jarman, that we have formally noted that, and there are a couple of things arising from that which will inform us. I'm aware of another matter. I may have to take advice, which Councillor Jarman you do know, but I think you probably want to raise another matter.
Yes, Chair, thank you for that. A matter which has been ongoing for some 4 months, and I appreciate you may stop me at any time, I don't know. A matter which has been going on since indeed the 20-something of October, related to the budget preparation process. And this has been a point of consternation between a large number of members and officers. And the matter has been brought up at a number of groups, including corporate scrutiny twice. Corporate scrutiny have provided officers with the ability to comment on that, which they've done. They've referred that matter to audit and governance because they believe it to be primarily an issue for audit and governance, I think with a strong small a and a big G, if I might put some emphasis on that. And so what we agreed to do was to, with yourself, was to produce a member briefing, which has been distributed. There were a number of iterations of that. We took further decisions within that to provide as a courtesy, obfuscating to some degree the names of individual officers who'd been involved in that process, and we've done that as a courtesy, particularly where it relates to decisions where there is no such obligation, only to advice. We've also taken contributions in during that period from the LGA and other external bodies. So the final version of that was distributed yesterday. I know that people have been busy discussing and reading it this morning, and we are seeking to include that within this item with your leave, as you'd suggested, and to agree some points from that, which are at the beginning of the document. And if I summarise those, without going into the detail of the document itself, which would be an inordinate amount of time, what we're looking to do here is 3 specific points. The first point is to, for this committee to agree that page 223 of the Constitution provides a clearly understandable entitlement of opposition members to submit an alternative budget to that of the administration and to access data and resources necessary to enable that submission. Now, that I think encapsulates very clearly what we believe is a very clear undertaking within page 223, which provides opposition members with that opportunity. I'm not talking here about the obligation, which is a legal obligation on the Cabinet under our present model to put forward a budget. I'm talking specifically about point B within that page, which gives opposition members the opportunity to put forward an alternative budget of their own. The second point is that statutory officers, specifically, must accept the primacy of our constitution as a legal instrument. That's a term from the LGA, by the way, as a legal instrument governing our constitutional provision, and they must follow that unless there is a statute which prevents that occurring, in which case that statute must be disclosed. And point C is to recognise, as was brought up at a number of committees,
Point of order,
including corporate scrutiny.
So I just let Councillor Jarman finish on that. I don't feel anything at the moment, but I'm going to bring in others.
So point C is to note, as was brought up repeatedly at corporate scrutiny, and I think was a remark made by Councillor Quirk himself and was supported by Councillor Brodie and others at that forum, that process has not been followed. So those are the three things we are seeking to bring forward to here. I am aware that there is some discussion about whether this should be included in detail today. There is a press release, I believe, being planned on this topic this afternoon, which may be amended or not, depending on the outturn from this committee. And I think it's been long debated, long discussed. The fact that it's come through corporate scrutiny and has been bounced backwards and forwards was perhaps a necessary part of that process, but clearly everybody is pointing it to this group to discuss. I should finish by formally moving that as a motion and a proposition today and look for a second.
Okay, so, yeah, so if I can ask you to switch your microphone off, Councillor Jarman. So the first thing so first of all, just for clarity, Councillor Jarman, Councillor Quirk alerted me to their concerns, asked how this might be approached through this committee. I'm not aware of anything being formally referred to this committee from a scrutiny committee. If it were formally referred, then of course it would be upon our agenda. So I'm not aware of that. My suggestion was not of advice, but of saying that I highlighted the fact that there would be an item on our agenda that related to confidentiality, which arose specifically out of the members' questions as minuted. So I need to make it very clear this is not a paper that I have invited, nor has it been commissioned by this committee in any way. And I'm, as Councillor Jarman, I've just setting out, as Councillor Jarman knows, I said anything that you wish to circulate to members is entirely up to you to decide to circulate. I think in terms of discussion today, I think there are certain niceties of the way in which business that is transacted, the information brought before us needs to be properly disseminated. So I'm going to ask Mr. Fernandez if he can give me some advice on that.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of this particular report, Chair, there are two issues involved. One is the substance of the report, and democratic engagement in budget setting is important, and there are issues within that paper that are of importance that need to be considered. I've not actually looked at the substance; it's come very late in the day, but I do know some of the background issues. So that's the substance of the issue. My only comment, Chair, is going to be about process, because those are two issues, substance and process. In terms of process, I mean, clearly this is an audit and governance committee. Following processes, if any committee, this is one of the most important committees to kind of show leadership in that area. Now, in terms of the process, what normally happens is that agenda items need to be formulated and published within the 5 clear days under the Open Government Rules and the 1972 Act. So there is a clear need for agenda items and the papers to be published 5 clear days before. Now, I think the problem we have here is that this report is seeking to piggyback onto confidentiality report, and I can't see the relevance. For one thing, the agenda item doesn't appear to support the paper, and the second thing is the paper is very late anyway, so it wouldn't fit within the open governance rules. So I think you have a difficulty there, Chair, in the sense that allowing the paper in would not comply with the rules. So this is not a judgmental issue for me. It's just me explaining the rules to you. Now, Chair, what you do have is you have a facility under it's 100B of the Local Government Act, which talks about open government rules. You have a facility there where you can allow it in if you so choose, but you've got to kind of reach the conclusion that there are special circumstances which you need to outline in the minutes as to why you're allowing it in. Basically, it's an urgency type consideration you need to make. So the issue for you, Chair, is this an urgent item that you would allow in, given the fact that it's not complied with the open government rules, it's not been published within the 5 days. Members of the public who might have been interested in how this this item went would not have had a chance to consider the paper, and members on the committee might not have had a full chance to consider the detail of the paper. So that's my advice is, the default position is that before you allow it in, you will need to be confident or comfortable that it's an urgent item where your special circumstances judgment can be applied. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So, colleagues, you'll have heard that advice to me and to this committee. I don't check my emails over weekend as a matter of course. It's protect my mental health by taking time off over weekend. So I saw that this paper had been circulated at 23 minutes to 10 this morning. I would not be comfortable in discussing a paper like that when I had still not had a chance to read it. The second thing I would advise this committee, and I'm not sure if Mr. Fernandez is saying it's a power to this committee or power to me as chair on the urgency, is that I don't believe that there are the special circumstances that in the normal understanding, and I imagine the person in the street would understand, requiring us to consider it at this moment in time. That is not to say that it couldn't be part of an agenda item in the nearer future. That's where I'm starting from. Councillor Quirk.
I think the advice was fairly clear that it's not appropriate for now, but the obvious thing to do is to put it onto the agenda for the next meeting. And
I'd just take some advice from Ms. Fernandez. This could be a legitimate paper to be included in a future agenda item.
Yes, Chair, thank you. If the committee is comfortable with receiving a paper like this, which appears to be a governance type paper, then it's within the gift of the agenda setting process that you normally follow to allow it in, Chair. So I wouldn't see it as a major issue.
I know in the past that a report that I prepared as a ward councillor was included in the cabinet agenda pack some years ago. So I think as long as due process is followed, and of course fairness, anything that I've not read it, so I don't know if there would be any aspect of it about which anybody might be nervous or cautious or feel that there needs to be additional information. But I think we could include it on a future agenda. Councillor Critchison first, then I think Councillor Quirk.
I'm just thinking that the councillors should have a knowledge of the appropriate process for putting in agenda items, and perhaps there's a learning need for some councillors that if they're not sure what the process should be, because obviously putting everybody in this position and you in this position, Chair, today, I don't think was probably the right way to go about it. Thank you.
To be fair, Councillors Jarman and Quirk did engage with me beforehand, but I made it very clear that what they choose to do is it's different from what the committee might commission to do. But I think the committee is minded to commission something, as in place this item on its work plan in an appropriate way. And I think that's what you were saying, Councillor Quirk, there as well. But did you want to come back, Councillor Quirk?
This should come to the committee as the committee. It shouldn't be diverted via cabinet because some of the issues relate to cabinet. It shouldn't be diverted to officers because some of the issues relate to some of our most senior officers. Something is an interpretation of the Constitution, and that's the governance bit of the Audit and Governance Committee, and that's what we should. I think I would propose that we put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
So I would note that our next meeting is the special meeting of the 29th of April. Would you feel that it would be appropriate to put that on the back end of that? I'd be perfectly content to do that, but recognising we might spend a considerable amount of time talking about the other governance matter on that agenda.
When we get there, it's a fairly simple decision. I mean, do we take what the Constitution says, plain English, or do we say that the plain English of the Constitution means something completely different? And I think it's a fairly simple thing when you actually get to look at the issue.
I think we'd be straying into potentially starting to debate an issue that we've decided not to debate today. But Councillor Jarman.
Yes, I'd be content to have it on the agenda for our next meeting, and on the basis that the paper is considered now as a contribution for that meeting and accepted as such, and we put it on that agenda.
Well, I think Mr. Fernandez has advised me and you that there's nothing to stop it being that. I'm looking up at the screen just to make sure he's not furiously shaking his head at me. He is not. It can go on our next agenda, and that meeting will be very governance focused indeed. Something which is actually very dear to me all the way through. I will just record my thanks to Councillors Jarman and Quirk for discussing this with me beforehand. I hope they understood why I laid out very clearly how I, as chair of audit and governance at that time, was approaching things and making sure that, as Councillor Churchman was very kind to say, that I approached it in a fair way, I hope. But Councillor Churchman, and then maybe we can dispose of this item.
Well, to me, it's quite clear cut as far as I can see.
If it's going to start debating the paper, if you're going, I think, just make sure you're not debating the issue now that we will now discuss.
To me, A, B, and C are quite clear cut, and
you can make those points on the 29th of April.
If I was in charge and if I was appointed, But however, I just don't.
I think I'm going to close it. I'm sorry, Councillor Chairman, but I'll close it down because it is straying into debating something which is not available to us to debate. But I think
Chair, so on the basis that we've agreed it as an agenda item for the next one and agreed the contribution of the paper, I would ask that there's no reason to delay that paper going on the website as an item already in preparation for that meeting. We shouldn't delay that until the last possible time. It is an agenda item, it stands there, the paper is published, and we'll accept it as such.
I couldn't give you that comfort personally because I have yet to read the paper. So, if there is a means by which it is achievable, let's see if that's done. But at the moment, I can't give you any comfort on it because I first saw it at 23 minutes to 10 this morning.
It will in any case be in the public domain after the meeting. So,
if it is, it is. But I think we have agreed that it's on our agenda for the next meeting. And thank you for helping me through that one. Wasn't one I was looking forward to. And we get on to the item 12, which is our work plan. As you can see, we do have a pretty heavy work plan anyway. We do, of course, have the 29th of April meeting, Monday, 29th of April, 10 o'clock. So I'll move us now to, unless any other colleagues who want to comment on the work plan. That was That's enough on that. Yeah, so item 13, members' question time. I've not given notice of any written questions this time around, thankfully. But any oral questions? Councillor Jarman.
I have one question which relates to questions, written questions or members' questions that are given, and the way that they're actually processed within Democratic Services for this committee. We've had a number of questions that have been put forward recently, and the answer is that, that they've been sent to the Cabinet member for an answer. And when I query what is the answer, the response I get is the Cabinet member has not responded, but you've been responded to, Councillor Jarman. We've addressed it according to the Constitution. And the answer is it's been sent to the Cabinet member. Well, that doesn't give me an answer to the question. That simply is part of a referral process. So what I'd like is the agreement of the committee that questions which are put forward in advance in writing or verbally or by the public are answered with the answer to the question, not by a referral to process that they've been sent to somebody else. That would seem to be eminently sensible, because otherwise we are at danger of simply becoming servants to process rather than actually giving the answers to the questions that are raised.
And it is my experience on this council that I always understood it, that if a question was referred to another body or person, then the question still remained unanswered until that other body or person had answered that question. So, but maybe that's also something that we can just tidy up in any constitutional arrangements, just to make sure that if it's referred to another body, it remains an open question. It is, in effect, a question through to Cabinet, as though it were, or whatever, or if it were asked at Cabinet and it was referred to this committee, then it remains an open question for this committee. But absolutely, I take your point, and I know you were frustrated a little by not getting some responses. I caveat that with a little, perhaps more than a little. But
You're right, Chair. In fact, I made a small list of the questions that had not been answered. One of them came from a member of the public. One of them came from a parish councillor who was here at the time in the gallery. And I think a number of them were raised by various members of the committee and non-members of the committee. So I'm glad for the clarification that it will remain unanswered. I think it was the phrase you used, until there is an answer.
Well, that is my view.
Good. I'm content with that. Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Critchison.
That's good. Are those answers shared with the whole committee when the questions do on the minutes, or that would be useful for everybody, wouldn't it?
So the member questions were on our minutes, were they not? Yes, and they go on the website, do they not, as well, to be reviewed. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will close the meeting at 12:29 by that clock. And thank you all for your attendance and engagement, both officers and members, and those who have joined us virtually as well. Thank you.